Shadow the Hedgehog was introduced solely as a rival and antagonist, but now works as a deuteragonist of sorts, being the one who handles the threats that Sonic usually is not aware of or is too busy to deal with, but will also show up to help Sonic out if things get dire enough in the world. As Shadow is about to get his own game and serves as the #1 rival to the Blue Blur himself, I thought it would be the perfect time to speak about Shadow, who he is, and how strong he truly is, using the canon continuity. This includes the IDW Comics. With that said, since I value the time of both you and I, let's cut this intro short and get straight into the video. Shadow the Hedgehog was created as the ultimate life form by Gerard Robotnik, the most intelligent character in the series. He's a modified artificial hedgehog who has more abilities than any other character in the series due to his modifications and being created with the DNA of Black Doom, an eldritch being of Sonic lore that is hell-bent on destroying humanity. But that's for another time. Due to all of these factors, Shadow has become one of the most powerful characters in the verse. And before we get into the myriad of Shadow's abilities, I'll go over the foundation, which are his stats. Although Shadow is directly comparable to Sonic, there are still some who would say he isn't. Starting with his strength, Shadow has many feats of attack potency, being able to directly combat Sonic in Generations as a boss. Every single one of his attacks do actual damage to Sonic in the game. In the IDW Comics, which are an extension of the game characters, he's been able to go directly back and forth with Sonic in issue 6 and is shown having the lead against Sonic for the most part. Issue 10 of IDW Sonic would have Shadow completely beat down Neo Metal Sonic, who had copied Sonic's bio data, basically copying all of his moves, his speed, his strength, etc. Everything about Sonic was copied and was able to overwhelm Sonic in their first confrontation in the comic. This is the same Sonic who defeated Infinite and the same Sonic who would go on to absolutely stomp Giga Omega. This robot was absolutely toying with everybody that wasn't a Hedgehog or Knuckles, with Sonic and Shadow being portrayed as narrative equals. Despite Shadow having better feats in the comics, you could assume that Shadow could do the same, if not easier. Shadow is to fight the likes of Metal Overlord, Mephiles, and other threats completely solo in Generations, and from what we know of this franchise, he's going to defeat them quite handily in his base, so I'll include that into his upscaling as well, as we know they require 3 supers from the Adventure era to defeat Metal Overlord, and when fighting Mephiles, Mephiles was in possession of 2 Chaos Emeralds, one of these containing enough power to manipulate time and space and move entire parts of the planet. Shadow also defeats Neo Devil Doom, who is the upgraded version of the original Devil Doom that Shadow had to go super to face. Gauging Shadow's strength is difficult, as the Sonic franchise has over 20 years of history, and upscaling for the characters who have only gotten more powerful as time has gone on. Shadow, currently in his base, is stronger than his super form the last time we've seen it, and this super form was able to throw down with planet level threats and above. For a character with as much lore, retconning, and all the above as any in the Sonic franchise, you're gonna have to play it safe, so I'll say that Shadow at bare minimum is a planet buster. Shadow's speed as of the modern era has also been massively increased over time due to being a consistent rival to Sonic, who does nothing but grow every single game. Since the IDW comics take place directly after Forces, and we see Sonic and Shadow fight on equal terms, he's bare minimum at Sonic's level when it comes to speed. Shadow has also been shown to be able to resist the pull of wormholes by using his base speed alone in Sonic 06. With Mephiles returning, all feats from that game are fair game once again. It is hard to say whether or not Sonic and Shadow are still equal as of Frontiers, because Sonic does gain a lot of strength during those events, but I would assume so, since Shadow's going to be going through his own stuff in Generations, and he'll be fighting Metal Overlord solo, which is again an insane feat. We haven't seen Shadow in the IDW comics for a while either, so I'm not 100% certain how things currently stand between the two, but I'll go with this stance that has been consistently correct for the last 20 years. Sonic and Shadow in base share speed feats for the most part, and I think it's no secret that the two are above the speed of light and much faster once they start using boost, chaos control, things of that nature. Shadow has insane durability. In the outdated Adventure era, in his first appearance, he was able to survive a fall from a very high distance in space after the final boss battle. He did this in his base as well, because Shadow was exhausted after sharing so much energy with Sonic in order to maintain their super states, and really had no idea how to work the form in the first place. Shadow has also gotten cooked by Metal Sonic in IDW Comics, and he got up right after, brushing it off. I think it's more important to display Shadow taking hits from Metal rather than Sonic in this case, because Metal and Sonic have the same strength in the comics, but Sonic always holds back, whereas Metal does not, as he's thrown punches out the gate with enough force to make Surge, a clone of Sonic, real. Outside of this, we know how the rings work with the Hedgehogs and Sonic, as it seems to absorb damage whenever held by them. Although rings don't seem to play as much of a role in the current comic continuity as it does in everything else, the games come first, and in the games, Shadow always has rings, so I'm gonna count on that. Shadow is overall a pretty intelligent person, being shown to operate all sorts of vehicles despite being a hedgehog, and is always able to operate his own plans, go on solo missions, do a lot of problem solving and critical thinking on his own, things of that nature. He's only dumb when the story requires him to be, and the writers have admitted to purposely making him do dumb things because of Sega mandates that are now thankfully gone. When it comes to battle intelligence, like all main rivals in any fictional story that includes fighting, he has some of the highest. He can use virtually any weapon he gets his hands on, and has been stated by Sonic himself in Sonic Prime to be his biggest rival during his introduction. I think it's kinda obvious that Shadow's battle intelligence is high, so I'm not gonna harp on it too much. Moving past his base stats, Shadow has all types of abilities at his disposal. First, his bread and butter, Chaos Control. This is a reality warping skill that allows Shadow to easily control space and time in order to slow down time, stop time, teleport, create rifts, travel through space-time, etc. Name any form of space-time manipulation, and he could probably do it with Chaos Control. Even in Sonic Battle, all of his specials that can be spanned easily are all Chaos Control techniques. Roaming Chaos, for example, is said to draw a distortion of time-space generated at a distance to pincher the opponent. Another technique called Chaos Magic is described to control the position of appearance and attack using space-time distortion. On top of all this, Shadow could always just do battlefield removal and throw someone into space, for example, using Chaos Control, as Silver, a hedgehog less experienced than Shadow, is able to do this. Chaos Emeralds are 7 ancient gems within the Sonic world with unlimited power contained in each. These are typically required for this technique and for Shadow to use it willy-nilly, but Shadow has been shown doing it without a Chaos Emerald. Anyways, Shadow does always carry an emerald on him, so this isn't a problem. Shadow also has Chaos Spear and Blast, two attacks that just give him more range and utility when fighting, and they're temporarily upgraded judging from the Doom Spears and Doom Blast. Shadow also has Doom Wings as well, that allows him to grow wings out of his back and fly now. I think every other extra ability he has just isn't important, as Shadow can do almost anything already. I did say temporarily upgraded for a reason though, as Shadow does lose all of his Doom abilities and connection to Black Doom at the end of Generations. Moving past Shadow's abilities, we can now speak about his transformations. Shadow has something of a transformation in the form of removing his inhibitor rings. These rings are typically placed on Shadow for the sake of restraining his full power. When he decides to take them off, he will gain a massive boost in strength, but will risk hurting himself in using all of his strength, so it's a last resort Kaioken kind of thing. Shadow hasn't done this many times, but we see that it's allowed him to completely wipe Mephiles, who was previously giving him tons of trouble, and Mephiles is probably the biggest threat Shadow has faced in the franchise, so this says a lot about Shadow's true strength. Shadow also has access to Chaos Boost, charging himself up with Chaos energy to a point where he's completely covered in red aura. This transformation allows him to reinforce everything he can do with Chaos energy. As we know, Chaos energy is a ridiculously powerful form of energy that exists in pretty much everything in the universe, but only a few characters can actually utilize it in their own ways, such as Sonic, Knuckles, and Shadow. Not only this transformation seems to completely remove all mental damage or influence from an enemy upon him. It serves as another boost of strength that's used for Shadow in Sonic 06, but I'm unsure if it can be stacked with Shadow's other forms. Past moving his rings and Chaos Boost, when Shadow obtains 7 Chaos Emeralds, he can tap into strength far beyond his peak, entering a Super State. Super States grant their users ridiculous, incalculable amounts of power, while making them invulnerable. Shadow has only used super once in the modern era to my recollection, and that one time is more than we all needed to see. He was able to contend with Solaris, a multiversal, temporal being that exists across the past, present, and future. He was stated to eat dimensions for lunch. He's no joke. Shadow hanging with this enemy says more than enough of how much of a boost he gets in his super state. And again, Shadow can take off his inhibitor rings while being in this super state, becoming even stronger. Shadow's super state is comparable to Sonic and Silver's as well, and we know Sonic has fought all sorts of eldritch beings back in the day, with his most recent encounter being an entity referred to as the End. In order to face this being though, Sonic would have to unlock a new form that drastically increases the strength of his super state, as the regular Super Sonic couldn't do much to him. Maybe Shadow could remove his inhibitor rings in his super state to contend with this being, but I doubt it, and I don't believe Shadow will be receiving a power boost similar to Sonic and Frontiers, since that was implied to be a one-time thing. And one thing to note is that, just like Sonic, Shadow is way more powerful now than he was when he fought Solaris. So we don't really know the strength of Super Shadow. The best we can do is just liken him to the current strength of Super Sonic. Of course, Shadow's greatest weakness is that he can easily exhaust himself when trying to put down enemies fast, and he can be quite arrogant at times. But I'm not going to beat down on him too much for this, because his portrayal in Shadow Generations seems to heavily imply that he'll be facing all of his old enemies, even ants, with the might of a lion. He's been humbled a lot in the comics as well, to a point where Silver had to give him a pep talk. So I do think that his arrogance is dissipating. There's also Zombot Shadow for the 3 people who are going to say I forgot about him. The Zombot virus is a virus that will affect anything it makes physical contact with, turning the infected into a zombie metallic robot organism thing. Shadow, when infected by this virus, yes, the Shadow that's immune to all viruses but somehow got infected by this one, has the same amount of strength, loses a decent chunk of his battle intelligence, but still has above average intelligence, as it's shown that he operates a little different from every other Zombot in the series. And again, he has the virus, so he's able to one-tap anybody and get them infected. Nothing special really, but why not? It's canon and a different form of Shadow. With that said, if you had to ask me how strong is Shadow the Hedgehog, I would say that he's certainly one of the strongest characters in the Sonic franchise and easily sits in the top 3. I'd even argue that he'd be top 1 if it weren't for the events of Frontiers. Facing off against Metal Overlord solo is a massive feat in of itself and easily propels him to the ranks of the strongest. Sadly, Super Sonic 2 and the End just destroy the power scale of the series, and this includes Shadow, so I can't put him on their level yet. Maybe, just maybe, Shadow Post Generations changes this. With that said, if you enjoy content such as this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.